You're listening to How to Drink Less, and I'm your host, Adriana Cloud. Whether your goal is to cut back, take a break, or say goodbye to alcohol for good, this podcast will help you stop drinking on autopilot, learn how to manage cravings, and feel fully in control around alcohol. It's easier than you think. Listen on to find out how. Hey everyone, welcome back to How to Drink Less. Today I want to talk to you about a misconception that comes up all of the time in coaching sessions with clients, in conversations on social media, in my own past experience. And it's the idea that if we just felt bad enough about our drinking, we would finally stop. That somehow, if we could pile on enough guilt, enough regret, enough self-loathing, then we would reach a point where change would be inevitable. And I used to believe this 100%. I thought that if I could just be harder on myself and stricter with my rules, and if I talked to myself sternly enough, that would keep me accountable. So, in today's episode, I want to unpack why shame doesn't work as a long-term strategy for change and why you can't shame yourself into drinking less. And of course, I'm also going to talk about what actually does work instead. But before we dive into what to do, I want to spend a little bit of time with why we resort to shame in the first place. Because the shame spiral around drinking is so common and so damaging, and unless you can really see it clearly, it's hard to get out of it. So first of all, shame doesn't start with drinking. It starts with a thought about your drinking. It starts when you wake up after a night of drinking too much, and your brain immediately says, "What's wrong with you? You said you weren't going to get that drunk ever again. You always do this. You're hopeless and you never change." And that little voice, the voice of your inner critic, is what creates shame, not the actual alcohol. Alcohol is just a liquid in a glass. It doesn't do anything, it just sits there. Shame is the emotion that arises when you believe that there's something fundamentally wrong with you, and when you think that your drinking means you're broken or weak or out of control or beyond any hope of changing. And once that shame kicks in, your nervous system goes into overdrive. You go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So you might try to make up for overdrinking by doing a punishing workout or obsessively cleaning the house, or maybe you act extra cheerful just to mask how bad you really feel. Basically, you're trying to earn back your own approval through extra effort or discipline. In other words, you're being good now to make up for being bad in the past. And I use good and bad in quotation marks here. Or you might collapse into hopelessness. You might feel like there's no way to redeem yourself, and your brain and body might go into shutdown mode. You might say to yourself, "What's the point in trying? I'll just mess up again." Or you might end up reaching for another drink just to take the edge off how bad you feel, which of course just deepens the shame. And that's what I used to do. I used to think that shame was the thing that would keep me on track. I thought that if I just made myself feel bad enough, I would stop doing the thing that I regretted. Every time I reached a new low and I promised myself, "This is it, never again will I drink this much, I really mean it this time," it came from shame. Shaming myself and beating myself up felt like the right thing to do. It felt like that's what I deserved, and I genuinely believed that it would help me to act differently in the future. Well, it didn't. Because when you tell yourself that you're broken and doing something wrong, you're not trying to understand yourself and your behavior. You're just trying to escape yourself. And the fastest way to escape yourself is, yes, a drink. So you see the vicious cycle I kept myself stuck in. Rather than making it easier to make better choices, I created the conditions where I just wanted to hide from my inner bully who was yelling at me for being a pathetic loser with no willpower. I hated myself because I drank too much, and then I drank to escape how bad that self-loathing felt, and then I hated myself more for drinking too much again. And I did that for years. So let's be really clear on this. Shame doesn't make you more self-aware, it makes you more self-avoidant. When you feel ashamed, your instinct is to hide. You don't want to look at what happened. You don't want to reflect or investigate. You just want to forget and run away. And that's a very human instinct. We all do it. And how do we forget? How do we run away? With distractions and with numbing and buffering, with more of the same behavior that we're trying to change. Brené Brown, who has done some incredible research around shame, says that shame thrives in secrecy and silence. The more we hide it, the more power it has over us. But when we bring it into the light, when we name it and talk about it, it starts to lose its grip. That's what I want to offer you today, a way to loosen shame's grip. And I want to add a quick aside here, because this is important. Guilt and shame are not the same thing. Guilt says, I did something bad, while shame says, I am bad. And that difference is everything. Because guilt can be useful to some extent, or at least it can show you behaviors that you don't want to repeat. If you drink too much and you say something that you regret, guilt can lead you to apologize and repair and to learn from that. Guilt says, I don't like how I acted and I want to do better next time. But shame says, I'm a failure. I'll never get this right. I am fundamentally flawed. So shame takes one isolated incident, one specific conversation, one night of overdrinking, and it makes it mean something about you as a person. And like I said, shame doesn't motivate change, it motivates escape. Here's what I've seen in my own life and in the lives of my clients. You cannot hate yourself into healing. You cannot shame yourself into making better choices. Because if your desire to change is rooted in self-loathing, what happens when you do make progress is that you don't trust it. You don't believe it. You keep looking for ways to sabotage it because you have this deep-seated belief that something is wrong with you. When you try to shame yourself into changing your drinking, it might work for a day or two, but it's not a long-term strategy. Even if you manage to stay away from alcohol for a while by being mean to yourself and letting your inner critic run the show, you still haven't addressed whatever is driving you to drink in the first place. And if you haven't addressed your desire for alcohol, any success in not drinking will always be tenuous because it will hinge on how much willpower you can summon in the moment. Whereas if you take the time to understand your drinking patterns instead of running away from them, you meet yourself where you are instead of where you think you should be, and you build from there. Relying on shame as motivation is also more likely to create the conditions for relapse because it teaches your brain that drinking is a moral failure and that you are fundamentally bad for having the desire to drink. But wanting a drink is not a character flaw. It's a learned coping mechanism. It's your brain reaching for something familiar that it thinks will help. And that's something you can work with. I have a whole podcast episode on this, actually. It's episode 10, called It's Okay If You Still Want to Drink. So go and listen to it if you haven't already. The point is that it's normal to still have cravings for alcohol, even when you know that alcohol isn't doing you any favors, and even when you might have consciously decided that you want to cut back or to quit. It's normal to still want to drink if you have repeatedly relied on alcohol in the past to help you feel better or to relax or to deal with overwhelm or to numb social anxiety or whatever it is. And using shame as a way to try to motivate yourself to do better does not work. So, if shame doesn't work, what does work? Here's what I have found, both from my own experience and from helping other people to quit drinking or to cut back. First of all, you have to replace judgment with curiosity. Instead of asking, what's wrong with me? Try asking, what's going on for me right now? Instead of asking, why am I like this? Try, what problem is this drink solving for me? This is a shift from self-judgment to awareness. And I know for some of you, it might be really difficult to lean towards this kind of softness in how you talk to yourself, because you believe that you have to be super strict and almost militant in order to not fall off the rails entirely. But curiosity is not an act of indulgence or softness. It's actually a requirement if you want to change your relationship with alcohol. Second of all, you have to practice self-compassion. You have to stop treating yourself like a problem to be fixed and start treating yourself like someone worthy of care and support. Imagine a friend came to you and said, I drank too much again. I feel like a failure. You probably wouldn't say, well, yeah, you are a failure and there's no point trying to change. You would probably say something like, hey, it's okay. We all sometimes do things that we're not proud of, so cut yourself some slack and let's figure out what happened. And you deserve that same grace that you would extend to other people. You deserve to extend that to yourself. Third of all, you have to build emotional resilience. When you stop using shame to motivate change and instead bring curiosity and compassion to your patterns, you start to develop a whole new skill set. You go from gritting your teeth or forcing yourself to behave differently to learning how to actually handle the full range of human emotions. You learn how to feel your feelings instead of running away from them. That's the real work. It's the ability to sit with discomfort instead of sedating it, to allow anxiety or sadness or overwhelm or loneliness without immediately trying to fix it, to ride the wave of a craving without getting pulled under, and to recognize that feelings are not emergencies. They're just temporary physical sensations created by your thoughts in that moment. When you build that kind of emotional resilience, your drinking starts to lose its power. Every time you feel discomfort without trying to outrun it, to numb it, or to shame yourself for it, you're gathering evidence that you can handle big feelings. You see that you can survive big feelings. You see that you can survive discomfort. And the more you can feel something uncomfortable without falling apart or needing to fix it immediately, the more trust you build in yourself. You become someone who can stay with yourself no matter what and have your own back. And that's real power and agency. So, if you're trying to change your drinking habits, let go of the belief that you need to be harder on yourself and instead focus on becoming someone who can sit with discomfort. That's the single most important thing you can focus on that will help you break your dependence on alcohol. And finally, to break up with shame once and for all, get support, get help. Whether it's a coach, a therapist, a group, or a close friend, stop trying to do this alone. If you could have changed on your own, you would have done that already. Shame thrives in isolation, and so you need support to counteract it and dissolve it. When you share what's really going on with someone who gets it, that shame starts to lose its grip. You realize that you're not the only one who's struggled or slipped or felt stuck. You realize that your story isn't as unique or as unfixable as you feared. This was one of the most profound lessons for me when I was trying to quit drinking. I was so ashamed that I'd let my drinking get as bad as it had, that I didn't want to tell anyone that I was struggling. I didn't want anyone to know just how big of a problem I had. But that meant that I also cut myself off from support, and I tried to just quit on my own. And I do not recommend that. I've said this before in the podcast, but I really wish I had asked for help sooner. I wish, first of all, that I had told at least a couple of my friends what was really going on, because in hindsight, I know that they would have supported me fully. And I also wish that I had looked for professional support sooner than I did, because in my shame, I kept myself stuck feeling miserable for way longer than I needed to. And I made the whole ordeal of quitting unnecessarily miserable and lonely. I prolonged my own suffering, essentially. And if you take one thing from this podcast, I want you to be kinder to yourself than I was to myself. Please reach out for support. Hire a coach, whether it's me or someone else, or get a therapist, or join a support group in person or online, even if you do it anonymously. But please don't suffer alone in silence. Let other people who have walked this path before you guide you and help you and cheer you on. You will save time, you will save money, and above all, you will feel better sooner. Trust me. And once again, I will remind you that you are not broken. You're not a failure. You're a human being who developed a habit in response to pain, stress, overwhelm, anxiety, or pressure. And that's not a moral failing. That's you doing your best with the tools you had at the time. And shaming yourself for your past choices will not help you to change any faster. You don't need to be meaner to yourself to stop drinking. You actually need to be kinder. You need to be more curious, more open to meeting yourself where you really are, not where you think you should be. That's the work I do with my clients in every coaching session. That's the work I did with myself eventually. And that's the work that changes everything. So, next time you wake up after drinking more than you planned to, instead of spiraling into shame, pause and take a breath. Ask yourself, what was going on before I poured that drink? What feeling was I trying to soothe or to avoid? What feeling was I chasing? And then ask, what can I learn from this? Because when you shift from shame to awareness, you stop seeing yourself as the problem and you can start looking for a real solution. You're not going to be able to bully yourself into changing. The only way to make that change in a way that lasts and feels good in the long term is to understand why you're drinking and then work to develop different beliefs around alcohol and gradually build new habits. Not with more rules and punishment, but with patience and compassion. When you're ready to take the next step, I would love to work with you. I help smart, self-aware people to break the shame cycle and change their drinking from the inside out, without white-knuckling it or relying just on willpower. If that's what you want, book a free consultation with me and let's see if we're a good fit to work together. The link for that is in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, or please share the episode with a friend. Let's keep spreading the message that shame is not the answer and that there is another path. This is where I leave you for today. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next week. If you're looking for practical advice for how to say no to alcohol and say yes to yourself, you will want to get on my email list. Sign up to receive my free guide with 7 steps to kickstart your sobriety. The link is in the show notes, so go and grab it now, and I'll see you soon in your inbox.